indeed. And here, of course, in our makeshift studio in front of the cathedral where it's all going to happen, we are joined by Zubeida Jaffer, who is a journalist. She's a publisher, a struggle activist in her own right. Good evening, Zubeida. Thank you very much for being our friend.
I love the fact that you think it's good evening. You're so used to working.
So used to working in the evening.
That's good morning.
And thank you very much for joining us.
It's an absolute honor. Pleasure to be here today.
We were talking earlier about the fact that it hardly ever rains on New Year's Day in Cape Town, in spite, of course, of the often miserable weather you find in this part of the country. But on New Year's Day, it's generally pleasant. People can go to the beach and have fun. But look how it is today.
Well, it's the blessings for the arch, eh? It's Pula, it's coming. And it's so wonderful that he's getting every possible blessing on the day that he's sent off. So it's delightful.
Do you think whoever, like, he might be looking at us, we're thinking, look at them, they're all miserable.
He's laughing, and especially at us in the media, he was always very amused, firm and amused, and lecturing to us. But so he must be thinking, look at them now, standing there getting wet.
And Zubeida, one of the things that for me and as a journalist, and I can only imagine for you when you were doing all those stories and listening to some of the political speeches that were made in this particular church behind us, I wonder for you as a journalist, did you always know that he was such like a towering figure over the world? Because literally he was small, but he really became an influential figure. Were you always aware that you're in the presence of greatness?
He didn't become an influential figure. He was an influential figure right from the start. I mean, he was there at every turn. And that was so extraordinary, that he didn't skip a beat. And that's why one feels that the loss is so great, because he was on the streets. He was on the streets with the people. I remember at Governor Mbeki's funeral, he actually stopped his car and allowed me to sit next to him. And he said to me, those people that are running alongside the car, shouting Tutu, Tutu, those were the people who brought the change. And I said to him, but they still live in squalor, because Umgov had chosen to be buried in KwaZakele.
And if I can just pause you for a second, Vuyo, the family is also starting to arrive, and I think that's Mondli Kongobele there, the minister in the presidency as well.
The minister in the presidency, Mondli Kongobele, making his way to the cathedral, and on screen we also seeing members of the Tutu family making their way here. The convoy you're seeing on the one screen are the members of the Tutu family who are making their way here.
And Zubeida, as we were talking, I mean, that home in Milnerton, a lot of people are really thinking back to those moments, but you were still talking to us about those times, people shouting Tutu, and funny enough, I can't help but think of today as people are saying 22.
22, that is amazing. You know, it was so interesting that he said to me that look at the patience of the people. That was in 2001, but those who have so much complain all the time. You know, he was very conscious of that, and I've never forgotten that. You know. I've also never forgotten the fact that he had to make the effort to take us to the beaches to open up, you know.
Zubeida, just a quick one. I'm going to ask us just to pause. I know we have you for quite some time, but I do believe that our colleague Vuyo Samgele Masego is standing by with the mayor of Cape Town, Mayor Jordan Hill Lewis, as well as the minister in the presidency. Samgele, if you are able to hear us, pick up then with the minister and the mayor. All right, it doesn't look like we have Samgele there in the picture, as we can see him talking to. We'll try and get Samgele back. Now, Zubeida, one of the things that we were talking about is his influence, is the fact that, he was able to draw people from all walks of life, but other people really just reduce Vuyo, his contribution to rainbowism, if I can put it that way, and just say he was able to pull people together. But his legacy is bigger than that.
He had an impact on the world. He was not scared to speak out about issues all across the world. And I hear his impact was enormous. It's not just about fluffy, airy-fairy, nice coming together. It was about stern stuff. It was about, teaching us that we all have to be connected, and when we are connected, when we are together, when we reach out, when we look beyond the race and class, then we can be strong and we can solve our problems.
In fact, one of the elders, former Prime Minister, was talking yesterday on one of our programs about how the world actually identified Desmond Tutu as a person of interest, as a global leader in his own right. They took notice of him early on, and especially in the absence, of course, of the political leadership of the country, the authentic political leadership of the country at the time. Remember, your Nelson Mandelas were on Robben Island, your Oliver Tambos were in exile, your Robert Sobukwes were in prison, and so on. And when people like Desmond Tutu started emerging, the world started noticing. And you will know this, Zubeida Jaffer. That's when then people like Oliver Tambo started saying, how do we then get to have these religious leaders who have demonstrated an ability and a capacity to be leaders in their own right, and to be able to mobilize South Africans? How do we then leverage on what we are seeing already? And Desmond Tutu really, took up, the guardrails, and the rest, as they say, is history. Is history.
Yes, he taught us that that it's all one. That religions, there are different religions, but we are all one, and we are all on the same path. We are all on that same path, trying to connect with something bigger than ourselves. And yesterday I had an extraordinary experience, purely by chance. Came into the cathedral at exactly the time when the family was there, not knowing really this was happening, and walked along with them and had the privilege of being there when the coffin was opened. And what I think he's teaching us, as he did in life, that we have to be committed to simplicity. The coffin is a pine coffin. He was lying there, and it was extraordinary to see, in a white robe, with no fancy capes, as some bishops do have.
And Zubeida, sorry, just a second. I'm going to ask us just to pause for a moment there. As you can see on the side of your screen, the family is making their way here to the St. George's Cathedral, and our colleague Vuyo, Vanessa Puna, is watching these proceedings for us. Vanessa, I wonder, as the family makes their way here, surely a lot of emotions are really at play right now.
Good morning to you. You've just joined us here in Cape Town. What you're seeing on screen at the moment is, of course, the widow of late Archbishop And family members, the children making their way towards the city centre, towards St. George's Cathedral. They've left their Milnerton home a short while ago for this, if I can call it, a final drive to say farewell to their beloved husband of over 60 years, father, and of course a father to not just the Tutu children and grandchildren, but indeed a moral compass and a father to so many, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who died then at the age of 90 years old in Cape Town last Sunday, the Day of Goodwill that we celebrate here in Cape Town, Blaine.
SABC's tracking van, tracking Mama Leah as well as the family heading to St. George's Cathedral for the special official funeral Category 1.
Blaine, in the beginning of the broadcast you spoke about how your life has started in one place. There's a beginning, 1931.
Yeah.
There's a dash in between where everything happens, and at the end, 2021, where the Archer's life has ended. There's so much that has happened in between, and we've been following that throughout the course of the day.
Yeah, and it's so important to recognize what that dash represents. There's so much involved, 9 decades involved in that dash that separates those two numbers, birth and death. And we are witnessing the final part of it, but no doubt not the end. I say that because of the legacy that he leaves behind.
Absolutely, absolutely. We know that the Arch had a rich life, a full life. In our research, in the lead up to today's broadcast and the week's broadcast as well, I find out things that I didn't know. One of them being that Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu actually wanted to study medicine. He couldn't afford to study medicine and then became a teacher. He was born in Klerksdorp, four brothers and sisters in that family. And speaking about how he went from a teacher to an activist to a role model and a moral compass for South Africa. Very unusual. We're going to find out a little bit later on about what's happening with the weather in Cape Town. I know that people have spoken so much about it. You can see from the visuals there as Mama Leah and the family make their way to St. George's Cathedral. The rain, the slick roads, that does not happen in Cape Town.
Right, and you're from Cape Town, you know this well.
That's why I'm like, this is very odd. Does not normally happen. People who are deeply religious, people who believe in something bigger than themselves, are ascribing more meaning to this rain than climate change, which the Arch also spoke about. He's very passionate about different issues, LGBTQIA+ rights, climate change, basically people who are oppressed, speaking for them, being a voice for the voiceless. And here on SABC News, we're bringing you visuals, sights, and sounds of Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu's final ceremony to say goodbye to him as the world watches.
And I don't think we can brush aside the symbolism of rain, and for the fact that you're saying it's pretty uncommon at this time. It's important, I guess, as we process the loss of Desmond Tutu. As we were mentioning earlier on, a couple of days ago, the Anglican Archbishop Thabo Makgoba said that he did sprinkle holy water, blessed water on the body of Desmond Tutu. And immediately after that, I remember I was on air and we were in conversation with Lulama Matya, and she was saying it just started pouring after that. Symbolism, again, important to recognize that, apart from the issues of climate change, which, as you said, he was very vocal. And I took down some notes in terms of one of the talks he gave. I think it was back in 2020, where he addressed a climate change gathering, and he was talking about global emissions, and he said, time is running out. I have the quote in front of me. Time is running out. He said, we are already experiencing a loss of life and livelihood because of intensified storms and the shortage of fresh water, the spread of disease, rising food prices, and the creation of climate refugees. And he added, that the people who are suffering the most are the people who not necessarily caused this, the poor.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and that's in line with what he has come to be known about from an apartheid era until now.
Yeah.
The quote that our political editor kept on sharing, and I think which we'll hear a lot today, if you are quiet or neutral in the face of injustice, you're siding with the oppressor.
Yeah.
And of course, oppression comes in many forms. We were speaking to Senior Counsel Dumisa Nsebeza, and he was saying one of the things that he remembers about the Arch in his later life is his disappointment with the fact that the justice that he wanted for South Africans, that he fought for, didn't quite reach everybody. So we've got liberation, we have freedom, people can vote, but the Constitution isn't alive in people's lived existence.
Yeah.
And that's something that bothered him. It bothered him that they recommended, as a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, 300 people must be prosecuted. That did not happen. And he said it also spoke to the person he was, that he didn't just do things for show.
Yeah.
So he was part of this commission, he chaired the commission, he tried to seek justice, but when it finished, he kept on coming back to it to say, what's happening? Why isn't this being done? And I think so many lessons can be learned from a full life, a rich life, a life that's being celebrated, that was celebrated when he was alive across the world and now.
You know, I wonder if I can bring in our international editor, Sophie Mokwena. She's in studio with us. And no doubt, Sophie, you paid close attention to the TRC Commission back in the mid-90s, where he was appointed as chair of the commission. And I remember a banner back then, I think it was in the Eastern Cape, which said, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the truth heals. I wonder, did it? And Tutu's role in the healing process, Sophie?
As we watch those visuals of the arrival of the former Prime Minister Mary Robinson, a member of the elders, I think the issue of the TRC will continue to be with us for quite a number of years until matters are resolved, particularly issues that are related to reparation, but also for other families to find closure. Because you know very well, Blaine and Zinga, that much as the Arch and the rest of the team did what they had to do at that time, there are still outstanding issues. Even currently, a louder voice to say there was a recommendation that those who did not disclose or come forward to talk about what they did then in terms of the human rights violations, they must be prosecuted. And there are reports that there was some decision taken to agree that let's park this process for now. And now the families of those who are still fighting to find closure are saying, we want to know, why did you stop this process? And I think that is why the TRC matter will continue to be with us for a long time.
Sophie, we'll come back to you in a short while. I want to go back now to Cape Town. It's where we find my colleague Mariska Botha outside the St. George's Cathedral. Mariska, what are you witnessing?
Good morning to you. Yes, you were talking about the rain a little bit earlier, and how uncharacteristic it is to see rain this time of year. The Western Cape is a winter rainfall area. I don't know if you will see now, but I'm going to tipple. No, there's no drops there now. But a little while ago, it was pouring with rain here in Cape Town. I'm actually coming to you in front of the City Hall in Cape Town, where to my right and your left, they've set up a viewing area for people to follow the service. But of course, I think the rain is making it impossible for people to come out and attend the service in this way. Of course, only 100 people will be allowed inside the church. So this is an initiative from the City of Cape Town to include more people in the actual funeral service of the Archbishop. But while we're standing here, it's very significant because behind me, I will step out for a second so you can just see, that is the impressive City Hall of Cape Town. And you can see there's a statue of former President Nelson Mandela that was erected. And that's the spot where he stood exactly the same spot where he stood in 1990 when he spoke to the world for the first time as a free man. And the person who led him out onto that balcony triumphantly was Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu. So this is a very significant place, of course, in the history of the Archbishop and in the liberation movement. This will always hold a special place. That day in 1990, this area was absolutely packed with tens of thousands of people. But today, as we say goodbye to the Arch, it's a very different picture. Rain is pouring down. No people have come out to make use of the viewing area. And ourselves will make our way to Adderley Street in a little while, which is about half a block from here, to see if we can see Mama Leah and the rest of the family arriving at St. George's Cathedral.
Stand that the Deputy President, David Mabuza, is arriving. We will try to touch base with our reporter, Samkele Maseko. He's outside there. He's live for us. Samkele, what are you witnessing?
There, the former president of the Republic of South Africa, former President Thabo Mbeki, is arriving here for the funeral of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. There you can see former President Mbeki alongside the former First Lady Zanele Mbeki. They are going inside the hall now to pay their last respects to the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who was also critical of the era of former President Mbeki, particularly during the failed rollout of antiretroviral HIV drugs of that administration of former President Thabo Mbeki, where the Archbishop was very vocal about that era. You can see another high-profile dignitary arriving here to pay their respects to the Archbishop as he is laid to rest. There is also been businessman Patrice Motsepe and President of CAF. He's also arrived alongside his spouse as well. We've also seen the mayor of the Cape Town, Executive Mayor Gordon Hill-Lewis, and also the Premier Ellen Windy. We've also seen General Bantu Holomisa, who is here as well and has gone inside the hall. We are expecting the arrival of the President. That you can see the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo arriving there. We are going to try and go and doorstop the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. We're not sure if we are going to be able to, but he has also arrived here to pay his respects. I'm going to ask my colleague just to come up and we'll try get him at the doorstep of the hall as they go in. We will try and get a word or two from the Deputy Chief Justice, head of the State Capture Commission. Justice Zondo, just a word or two from you on the legacy of Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
It's a very big loss to our nation. It's a very big loss to the whole world. But we have to take lessons from him, his life and his preachings, and all that he taught us. We've got to move on as a nation and make sure that we don't forget the lessons.
Deputy Chief Justice, when you look at the horrific things you've been hearing at the State Capture Commission, has the lost moral compass voice of South Africa left?
Well, there is a lot that we have got to change in our country. There is a lot that each and every one of us has got to contribute to changing, to making South Africa a better country.
When can we expect your interim report?
Ask me on Monday.
Indeed, thank you. That is the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, who's also been shortlisted to be the Chief Justice of the Republic of South Africa. On that interim report, which has been postponed due to the mourning period, he says, let's rather ask him that question on Monday. Former President Mbeki has arrived. President Cyril Ramaphosa is also expected to arrive at 9:45 here at church for the church service to begin. We also anticipate the arrival of former President Kgalema Motlanthe.
We did hear, Samkele, last week that the report will be released in 3 parts, the first of which should be handed on Tuesday, the last of which in February 2022. Nzinga.
Samkele Maseko always finding time to get the answers, always finding time to speak to the right people, inserting himself, door-stopping Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo as he goes in there. We are bringing you, of course, visuals from inside St. George's Cathedral on your screen. You could see just a moment ago Premier of the Western Cape, Alan Winder, former President Thabo Mbeki, as Samkele has said, and Patrice Motsepe there, and Dr. Precious Moloi Motsepe as well. And so we're going to hand over to our colleagues in Cape Town, Bongiwe Zwane and Vuyo Mvoko, who are standing outside the cathedral. The rain has stopped pouring down. A very good morning again to you, Bongiwe and Vuyo. It's over to you.
And Nzinga, one of the things that is quite evident here is that as the dignitaries arrive, you're seeing there on your screen businessman Patrice Motsepe and CAF President Vuyo, and also then seeing the Deputy Chief Justice. That report, a lot of people are talking about it to say that, unfortunately this weekend had to put a spanner in the works and not really make sure that the deadline of the 31st is met. But as the dignitaries start to arrive, you can see even the media contingent here, they are trying to get as many pictures for you as possible, because the family is also making their way here. And you can only imagine at a moment like this, for Mama Leah, for example, someone that, when you read in the portrait, of the arch, she says, I thought he was just a stuck-up headmaster's son. And look at them today, 66 years later, they're now married, from someone who even proposed by saying, my parents want me to get married. And then she says, I can help you to then honor and obey your parents. Vuyo.
Humor from both sides in that household, no doubt. We're seeing the presidential motorcade. We're trying to establish who it is. Is it the deputy president, perhaps?
I'm trying to get closer, Vuyo, to see, and just to see if it is the Deputy President or the President of the country. It's former President Kgalema Motlanthe has just arrived, Vuyo, and that is just at the back of the arrival of the former President Thabo Mbeki.
Of course, a man who had to hold the fort after Thabo Mbeki was recalled for a good couple of years. Kgalema Motlanthe, the former Secretary General and former Deputy President, had to stand in before the elections that subsequently saw Jacob Zuma being elected president.
And I see that Samgele Masego is trying to get closer to see if he might be able to speak to the former president and get a word, Vuyo, because at a time like this, as Samgele said even before, they've released statements, they've spoken at length about their reflections, even talking, Vuyo, about some of the difficult moments that when the arch was criticizing the ANC, not shying away from that and talking about how all of that was done in the spirit that the arch, as some have described him, of putting those on the other side on the table.
Let's see if Samkele Maseko is going to be able to get Mr. Motlanthe to say a word or two.
Just a word or two from just, President, your words on the passing of Archbishop Tutu and the legacy he leaves.
Well, Arch is our moral compass, and he's done his bit. He's had good innings. All we can say now is to commend him to the high heavens, and that he rests in eternal peace here.
What can South Africans draw from his legacy, President?
Well, first of example, we should really emulate what he was able to do here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Your words, Mam Kuku?
Just condolences to the family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is for the former First Lady Kuku Mtshali there, and former President Kgalema Motlanthe speaking on the legacy of Archbishop Desmond Tutu as they are here to pay their respects. As you've seen, former President Mbeki arriving, the President of CAF, Patrice Motsepe, and his spouse are also here. We've also seen the arrival of Bantu Holomisa, the General. We've also seen the Mayor of the city of Cape Town, Gordon Hill Lewis, and also Ellen Windy, the Premier of this province of the Western Cape. President Cyril Ramaphosa is anticipated to arrive at any point from now. In fact, the President's vehicle is arriving as we speak now, Vuyo. You can see that convoy driving in of President Ramaphosa as he arrives here to pay his respects to Archbishop Desmond Tutu. You'd remember that in fact, it's not the president, it's another VIP vehicle which would signal that would most probably be the former deputy president and former director of UN Women, Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, as the blue light convoy of the presidency, the Presidential Protection Services, are arriving here. In fact, it is the former deputy president, Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, alongside the former National Prosecuting Authority head, that would be Bulelani Ngcuka. They have arrived here, the Ngcuka family, with the former Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, whom has been alongside the family from when the news broke of the Archbishop passing away. We will try and just get a word or two from the former Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, who has spoken extensively on the legacy of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. We will try and Doster, you'll excuse us as we can't keep these dignitaries for a very long time. Just a word or two from you on the burial today and the legacy of Archbishop Tutu.
Well, we will remember him for trying hard to make us better people, and may he rest in peace.
That is Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka, the former Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, formerly with the United Nations as the Director of Women, who has also been, as we had said earlier on, with the family from day one as the news broke of the passing of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. She was in Cape Town as well, alongside former President Thabo Mbeki and President Ramaphosa, who is also here in Cape Town, and he will be arriving at any point from now to deliver the eulogy here at the funeral service of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. There are many dignitaries arriving, but they are also adhering strongly to COVID-19 numbers, as there will not be more than 100 people here at the cathedral here in St. George's in Cape Town for the burial of Archbishop Desmond Tutu. The numbers have drastically been reduced. We have seen South Africans sending out their condolences on the passing of the Arch. What is rather surprising on the burial of Archbishop Desmond Tutu is that, as the visuals you are seeing, there is absolutely no red carpet. There is no VVIP. There is no special treatment. The coffin that is used to bury the Archbishop, as he will be cremated later on, you'd liken it to Joe Slovo when he passed away many years ago with the burial of Joe Slovo. He did not have an expensive casket. There is another VVIP vehicle arriving here in the church service, and with this large convoy, one would assume that just waiting to see the number plate of this vehicle, but it is the President of the Republic of South Africa. He has arrived here to deliver the eulogy of and to attend to the funeral of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who has been very critical of the governing party that Mr. Ramaphosa leads, and also dies at a time where the Arch is very despondent and sad and heartbroken at the trajectory that South Africa has taken over the years, particularly looking at the high levels of fraud, corruption, money laundering. The Arch goes to his final resting place in a state where people are living in deplorable conditions, and that man waving at the cameras right now has been tasked by the constituency and the electorate of South Africa to fix the problems of the Republic of South Africa. He has got an enormous task in his shoulders to try and make sure that the plight of South Africans is reduced, that everybody goes to bed with food, and that their living conditions are improved In fact, he had an opportunity to engage with Archbishop Desmond Tutu when he took over in the interim government after the recall of his predecessor, former President Jacob Zuma, to go and meet the Arch alongside the former Premier of the Western Cape. That would be Ibrahim Rasool, and Faiz Jacobs, who's the former provincial secretary of the governing party in this province, to engage with the Arch on the trajectory that the ANC would then thus be taking after that watershed 2017 ANC conference where Mr. Ramaphosa won the ANC presidency, subsequently in 2018 inaugurated as the President of the Republic of South Africa. So in essence, he and the Arch had a very good relationship, as he was pretty much seen as the ordained one to take over from former President Nelson Mandela. That was not to be, as Mr. Ramaphosa, President Ramaphosa, was very close with former President Nelson Mandela, who was in turn like a brother to Archbishop Desmond Tutu Vuyo.
And from us here, me and Bongiwe Zwane, right in front of the cathedral, from where the proceedings are going to be conducted from 10 o'clock. It's a welcome back. And with us, of course, keeping us company here is Zubeida Jaffer, who is an author, journalist, publisher, and a struggle activist in her own right. Zubeida, you took some time of your schedule yesterday and went to see the Arch as he was lying in state inside the cathedral. Why did you do that, and why was that so important for you?
Vuyo, it was actually quite by chance. I'd come to get my accreditation, and then I realized, my daughter said to me, "Mom, shouldn't we go in and see greet the Arch?" And we went, and I did not know that it was exactly the time that the family was going to view the body, and I sort of absent-mindedly just walked along. And there I had the extraordinary experience of seeing Archbishop Makgoba open the coffin and seeing the Archbishop in all his wondrous splendor. His face is so beautiful, smaller than normal, but so beautiful, so lit up. And he had on a white robe, and he had on a very unusual liturgical stole, which represented all the different religions of the world. And I was told that this was to his belief in taking with him all the religions and representing all the religions and taking it to the altar and take it to the Almighty. And it was just so absolutely, overwhelming.
Yeah, I know. He was. We all know that, a very ecumenical person. But did seeing him there in the regalia you just described, did it evoke any particular memory or memories?
Well, it's the simplicity of it. It was the simplicity of it all. It was the simplicity, and it showed that even in his death he was telling us, look, keep it simple. Keep it simple.
And be all embracing.
And be all embracing, and be close to everybody, and not be live above and live beyond. So I think it's a very important message. I think that he's showing us the way, and many people have said, what are we going to do now that he's not there? But that is not the question. The question is, what are we going to do with the example that he set for us? The example is there.
And that's so true.
The example is there, and yet people want more. We've got so many good examples. Tata Madiba, Biko, so many, Charlotte Maxeke, and yet we snivel and whine and cry. We must get up, and we must fix our communities, fix our families, fix our communities. We can do it, even in the small ways. And that's what the Arch wanted, and that's what the Arch would expect us to do. And if we don't do that, we are entirely squandering his legacy,
And what you talk about is so important, Zubeida, because a lot of people kind of thought that he would go into politics, but he didn't. And he made a huge difference even where he was. And that really forms part of the true legacy, that you don't need to be in government to change, as you say. Small changes really lead to big things.
Often people ask me, you know, they're overawed, you know, and ask about these things that we were supposed to have done, you know, over the past 40 years, you know, in my life. And then I try and explain it's not big things that you do. When you look back, you see it's big. But when you're doing it, it's all small. It's the kindnesses that the way we're kind to everybody, the way we help everybody, the way we look for the opportunities to stand against injustice, and the way we try and improve the lives of our families and our communities. It's in the small things, and everybody can do that. We can all do it. It's not just for the arch or for certain special people. It's everybody can make that decision today, that we will stop whining and complaining, and we will understand that it's in our hands. Nobody else is going to do it for us. Nobody else.
You know, I particularly like that last part of what you just said, that it's in our hands. One of the things I found very ironic, this disturbing even, over the past week since the Archer's passing, is how it was actually the people who actually took us, or with him helped us get where we are today, that were pledging, you know, to ensure that the dream he dedicated his entire life to, they are the ones who are now promising that we should go back there. We should continue from where they and the Arch, you know, left off. And it wasn't the generations after them that were making that promise. I found that rather disturbing, because you would have thought that your Alan Busaks, who spoke on Thursday, your Frank Chikanes, who also spoke on Thursday at a different memorial service in Johannesburg, would be the ones taking a back seat, and it would be the generations after them that would be making the promise on the back of what we're seeing this past week, to say, you know what, we need to go back. Where did we lose it? You know, where did we drop the ball? What is it that we can do, or upon his death?
And
you know,
Vuyo,
we are committing ourselves to doing much better than we have done up until now, and we should be the ones apologizing to that generation, to the generation of Desmond Tutu, and saying, we betrayed you, but you should now rest, and we should be the ones taking it from here.
And Vuyo, you know, you remind me of what Reverend Frank Chikane said, that let's not only make the pledges here, but let's go back and do what we need to do. Because you think about the latter part of his years, when he was supposed to be enjoying really the fruits of what he also took part in fighting for, to have to hear some of the chastisement and the words that he had, tough words, Vuyo, it really became very difficult, and you could tell that it was coming from a deep part of him that really did not like what was happening. And we saw just, Vuyo, a short while ago, a king of a country that also holds him very dear, Lesotho, you know, King Letsie III, also making his way in here. And it's these leaders who are hoping that South Africa is going to find a way of making his dream of really trying to get us back on track a reality. And it's going to be interesting, Vuyo, if
in
these
fact,
pledges
it actually
happen.
rests on the shoulders of young people, and I can't resist this. You know, at a time when it was unpopular for leaders to actually say, to the governing party especially, that what you're doing is wrong, right? It was young people who were pushed, you know, to the front by the elders who were running the organization at the time. It was them who had to reprimand or find fault with what your Bishop Tutus were saying at the time. You know, when he was saying, well, I'm warning you, it was young people who were sent out, or some of them, of course, took it upon themselves, you know, because they thought they were doing things that would resonate with their leaders at the time. But it was young people, you know, who actually came forward and said, Tutu was a sellout. Tutu doesn't know what he is talking about. So it is young people who should then, you know, be able to say, you know, we've looked back at some of the mistakes that young people have committed, or how we were complicit, or how we sat quietly and did and said nothing. In Desmond Tutu's honor, that should change. It is young people, you know, who should actually...
Yes, you know, often it's forgotten that the people, even the Arch was young, you know, 40 years ago,
yes,
or 50 years ago with the Soweto uprisings. He was young, and I mean, he was in his 40s. Most of us, many of us were in our 20s or even younger, and eventually in our 30s, and were able to bring the fresh energy into the situation and work very, very hard. So it's very important that we renew. It's very important that we renew, and it's very important that young people and that the next generation doesn't behave in a stupid way and have knee-jerk reactions and suggest that Madiba sold out, Tutu sold out, everybody sold out. You know, it's easy when you are not kicking the ball on the soccer field and you're a bystander and you're watching. But when you actually have to kick the ball, you know, it's a different matter. And so they must understand, young people must understand that the best was done under the circumstances then, and those walls of apartheid came crumbling down. We now have to clean up the mess, because there's a considerable mess, and we're at a very difficult moment in our country, and we should use this moment to begin to turn around our attitudes and our thinking about ourselves, because we are magnificent people. We are an amazing people. We've achieved so much. And look at our leaders. Look at Archbishop Tutu. We cannot expect to get more archbishops. We cannot expect to get more Madibas. We've been given all of that. God has given us all of that. And it's for us to strengthen ourselves and to find this inner strength and connect with our higher power in order to move each of our families forward. There's no other way. Nobody's going to help us. Nobody's going to suddenly magically, you know, make something happen. It's going to be the effort and the decision that each one of us takes about right or wrong.
And one of the other things that is also important to note in such a moment like this, and you alluded to it a little earlier on, is the simplicity of it all. The fact that, Vuyo, we're not seeing a red carpet here. There's no heightened security. There is security, but it's not heightened. And you look at the order of proceedings, Vuyo, it's the church. The church is in charge, true to the man and who he was. And you look at, you know, some of the people that are going to be taking part in this program, these are individuals that he would have been involved with at, you know, different times in his life. You look at the Right Reverend Michael Nuttall, who's now a retired Bishop of Natal, who is going to be preaching, and this is a promise that they made to each other, you know, that many years ago, to say that whoever goes first, you are going to be the one that preaches at my funeral. And then you also then look, Vuyo, at another part of his life, music. You think back to Imilo Njigantu, who are going to be singing here. You think back to the hymns, Liza Lisitingalako, so fulfill thy promise, O God of truth. And these are things that he would have planned, Vuyo, to the T, to make sure that in that Mpilo plan, we see the unfolding of today. We see the unfolding of simplicity, a man who enjoyed his solitude, who also made sure that, Vuyo, he draws from within, as some have said, that, you know, for him to live the kind of life that he lived, he needed to not let all of it get to his head. And so for us today, it's also just that moment, as you say, Zubeida, of pausing. But Vuyo, it's also the moment of truth, if I can put it that way, because there's been calls by various leaders of the church to say it's important to tell the truth about where we are. And the former President Thabo Mbeki is speaking to us as well on Full View this week, saying it's going to be important for the ANC to have an honest conversation with itself about where it finds itself right now, given the harsh words that the Arch had at some point for them.
In fact, I mean, this moment throws up so many things. It's, you know, our politics, you know, our history as a nation, and with that, of course, would come the, you know, the role of the ANC in where we come from, but also in who we have become as a nation. But it also speaks to the issue we're talking about, Zubeida, much earlier, you know, because there is that South African Council of Churches, a part of his life where he tried to bring together in a very significant way, you know, the South African church. You know, in other words, beyond and outside of denominations. You know, that is why later on, when the procession of the clergy is going to include people like Brigalia Bam, who is not a member of the clergy, but is the one-time General Secretary of the South African Council of Churches. Yeah. It also speaks to the fact that you're going to see Muslim, you know, and other religious clerics, you know, who are part of you know, this farewell, because he was an ecumenical person. He was all those things and not one thing or the other. And that should teach us, you know, that, you know, life is not about our little corners. Humanity is not about our little corners. And as he himself always said, God is not a God of the Christians or the Jews, you know, or Muslims, you know, is the God of us all.
You know, as we see what is happening in the country with the corruption and the violence and the bad behavior, one has to stop thinking that there's a huge spiritual disconnect. There's a huge spiritual disconnect because as a people, we have been a very godly people. We have been a religious people largely. And the behavior does not speak of a presence of God within the person. And perhaps the Archbishop's death, you know, puts it in front of us that we have to, whatever we believe in, the ancestors, God, or you don't believe, I have faith, but you have some belief. Whatever you believe in, you have to know you're part of something bigger. And you have to stop yourselves in your tracks, because you not only giving your family a bad name, but you are damaging your soul and your spirit. You're injuring your soul and your spirit. And that will live on in that injured way. And there's been so much injury already, you know, for so long, over 300 years of violence, that we must stop ourselves now, and we must say that we should commit to toning down our voice. The Archbishop was very forthright, but the Archbishop wasn't hurtful towards other people. Didn't say it in an ugly way. We can say to each other what we want to, but with love. Well, obviously there's always the element of anger, but we need to tone down our voices, and we need to speak, you know, fairly and justly to one another.
And that's what Peter Story, you know, was talking about earlier when we spoke to him, that he was a very strong character. You know, he made his views and known, you know, he drove points home. But the same guy, no matter how you differed with him, the previous day, the next day, he would smile, laugh with you, embrace you, and you weren't his enemy because you happen to hold different points of view.
Yeah. And Vuyo, I think back to conversations that I had with Advocate Dumisa Nsebeza as well as Yasmin Suka, who were part of the commissioners at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. One of the things that Yasmin said is, in the beginning, we were very confused as to why this person wants to bring to the table and find the humanity of those that have wronged people during the acts, committing such atrocities during apartheid. And Zubeida, one of the things that she then says is, we were young, we were excited, we wanted to get to the bottom of what happened and really, Vuyo, get those who committed such acts behind bars. And she says, those dreams were wiped out of our eyes, and he said, no. This is a process where we need to bring everybody to the table. It doesn't matter what they did. We need to bring them to the table, find the humanity within them, and understand what made them do these things. And Vuyo, it is to be that particular point again when you think back to the moment when they were testifying against P.W. Botha. And you sit there and you're thinking, how did it all happen? That someone who should be baying for blood is going to find themselves saying, no, it's fine, let's sit, let's talk. And it's that thing, Vuyo, that also a lot of people say adds to the layers that we now know as the Arch and his legacy.
But also, I mean, remember, and Zubeida, you will remember this very well. It didn't mean that his approach was necessarily or always right. For instance, the human touch you were talking about that he brought into the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings was often questioned by the very commissioners of the TRC. Remember the controversy around how people felt he was going out of his way to get Winnie Mandela to apologize. I mean, the co-chairperson of the commission said, what was he doing? Because he didn't think it was the duty of the commission to try and extract an apology from someone. Yes, and so he was. Again, it goes to show that he was imperfect. He was a human being, but deep inside, he wanted to do good, and his flaws notwithstanding.
Yes, that subsequently we've understood that was an indelicate moment because Mam Winnie, it's become clear that she was not involved.
I'm raising it because it became a talking point.
It became clear
this
that
week.
it wasn't, that she wasn't responsible for many of those things that she was accused of. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, would it have been better without the TRC in the whole process for us, or did we gain something? I think we definitely gained, because we put it out there on the table as part of the national conversation, part of the national record. It's there, and we can be proud of that. And the Arch led us through that. It could have been no better person. Unless there's somebody who can now say who would have been the better person. It's just like with the president, people say, oh, we don't want this president. Then which president do you want? We have to be very clear about what our strengths are and the best we can do in a particular situation. And the Arch did absolutely magnificently. Arch did. He was, his efforts were, scuppered when the government did not follow up and implement the rules, the recommendations of the TRC. And it's very disturbing today that the families have to struggle like this, even to get a meeting with the president or a meeting with any officials. I mean, it's disgraceful. It's disgraceful, and I think it's very unkind to make people beg.
And
it's really
Zubeida,
unkind.
it is.
Even if you can't do anything really about it. But sit down, talk, come forward, ease people's pain. It's just incredible. What are we dealing with? The old order, the new order? They must pull themselves together, really.
And you know, when you touch on that, it's one of the things where the former commissioner, Advocate Dumisa Nsebeza, calls a betrayal of the Archer's legacy. The fact that nothing has moved when it comes to the prosecutions around those cases, because not everybody told the truth. Not everyone deserved amnesty. And we saw even from the report, not everybody got amnesty. But the way in which things are moving has really upset even those around him. And Advocate Dumisa Nsebeza was even saying that for him, it always is going to be something very bitter. And he, even as a commissioner, is battling to accept it and understand that they did all of that work. And yet you've got the families like the families of the Kredok 4 who are still hoping that someone is going to be brought to justice, Vuyo. And these are just some of those, you know, moments when we really need to dip our heads in shame as a country and really think long and hard about this, because he's not happy about that. And he, you know, the Arch left this earth without seeing anything being done about those prosecutions, Vuyo.
It is indeed one of the low points. And I remember, I mean, after she she held a media briefing, the National Director of Public Prosecutions, we had an interview with her, and she kept on promising that they are tending to the matter. Of course, as you correctly point out, the families of victims and survivors aren't happy at all at the pace. They keep bending backwards. They say to accommodate the National Prosecuting Authority, understanding that these organizations were hollowed out, at some point, and many of them are a shadow of what they once were. But that said, they are still not appreciative of the pace, but they are also not appreciative of the fact that the National Prosecuting Authority is not treating these matters with the urgency that they deserve. Well, we are going to hand back to Johannesburg, the SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, where Nzinga and Blaine are, just to get a perspective from their vantage point before, of course, you come back to Cape Town when proceedings are about to start at the cathedral behind us here, where the funeral service is going to be held.
Vuyo Bongiwe, thank you.